Yeah, turn the headphones up your check. Look at the map they gave you, then burn it. One ghost, three faces, tell them listen close. Yo, I see priests talk of Enoch walking with the sky kings. Pharaohs ink the walls where Ibis bird sings. Greeks write a Hermes on the coin that the mint flings. Yet the clock is rigged, son, they pull the slicks. Mind your tricks, split one man into three. Made the lie stick, they built a graveyard of time just to bury the spine. Took a medieval scholar, pushed them back on the line. The scribes in the back room redated the scroll. Gave the fountain three names just to fracture his soul. He wasn't in the desert when the pyramids rose. He was dodging the plague where the cold Danube flows. They stretched out the centuries, added the grind to hide the true masters who were running the line. So Enoch is stuff when the ink is the skin. Hermes is the shadow where the axioms begin. One brain in the dark, yet they gave him three graves. So your calendar's bleeding, the decades are switched. They cloned the elite while the project was pitched. One man became three under lanterns of oil. They buried the truth in the deep frozen soil. The years of a shadow, the timeline is bent. We trapped the true king in the script that they sent. They talk about the jade and the emerald stone like it dropped from the stars to an ancient throne. Nah, John D was typing in a room full of smoke, writing codes in the dark while the monarchy broke. They cooked up the tablets in the 14th age using heavy ink strokes on a fresh bleached page. They forged a long lineage to validate the math, to keep the street corner from the sovereign's wrath. Alchemists masking what they found in the lab, placing modern steel blades on an ancient slab. So the text isn't old, it's a brilliant design, a renaissance hustle to control your mind. They invented antiquity to hide the receipt. Now the duplicate phantoms are controlling the street. Look at the ink, see the stains on the hand. The past is a movie that the rulers planned. Ayo, the calendar's bleeding, the decades are switched. They cloned the elite while the project was pitched. One man became three under lanterns of oil. They buried the truth in the deep frozen soil. The years of a shadow, the timeline is bent. We trapped the true king in the script that they sent. Look at the street lights, they flicker the same. 1,000 years at it, just to alter the name. They stole the architecture, claimed it was old, to keep the projects broke and the narrative cold. We living in the ruins of a closer empire. The ink is still wet on the roots of the tree. They built a fool's cage for the things you can't see. The Hebrew, the Greek, and the Nile elite are the same medieval council that ran the main street. They copied the files and they shifted the weight to make you think progress is a matter of fate. Yet the science was birthed in the closer zone by a singular hand that was close to the throne. So strip down the myth, see the flesh and the bone. We breathe in the dust of a stolen stone. The lexicon's heavy but the syllables tight. I bring the true weight to the dark of the night. No filler in the verse, just the architecture clear. They lied about the century to feed you the fear. Three ghosts in the room, yet it's only one man. Figure out the theft, then you disrupt the plan. One man, one pen. They gave you 3 books to keep your mind running in circles. Out the tenement yards to the cosmos. Clean the dust off your glasses. It's closer than they tell you. You check.
Oh, wow. Hey, pura vida, mi gente. Thank you for tuning in once again. Appreciate you guys being here. Thank you for tuning in. Thank you for tuning in. All right. Just gonna go ahead and say hi real quick. All right. Pura vida, mi gente. Pura vida. All right. Thank you for tuning in. we're gonna do a little community educational reaction. We're gonna learn from a person that is known, when it comes to history and like the History Channel or Discovery Channel, and he got a lot of good, interesting stuff. We're talking about Scott Wolter. So first of all, fair use. Hey Scott, have you ever seen this? Hey man, we know we're doing this for educational purposes. All right. Um, under fair use. So, and also, it's a live PowerPoint presentation. It's nothing to do with TV. So, we're gonna just do reaction video like everybody else on YouTube. All right. Thank you. And fair use. Thank you for tuning in, guys. Appreciate you guys. We're gonna go ahead and let me just get the videos right here started. Thank you again for coming through. All right. Caught alive. Yeah, you caught alive. Yeah, you caught alive. That's what's up. Appreciate you guys being here. Now, sorry. So I just want to say the first video I'm gonna show, we're gonna watch. It's from 2016. You guys are gonna see who he's presenting it. Pay attention to who he's presenting it to first. This is somebody who's recording, like VHS recorder, whatever, or HD little camera, whatever. It's not the best quality, guys. All right, it's not the best quality, but I try to fix the audio at least a little bit. So hopefully we can. Most of it, I think we can pay it. We can actually understand it and hear what it's actually saying and showing. It's pretty crazy. I mean, again, fair use, commentary, educational purposes, critique, reaction, the same mind. It's just a home video. It's just a home video footage that I found on archive.org. Archive.org, public domain. Okay, thank you. So, hold on, watch this, guys. Pura vida, mi gente. All right. Pura vida. You see that? That's where we're gonna start right away, right there. Look. Check it out. All right. So let's get to it. Let's get to it.
So again, in the interest of time, I want to get over here because I want to share something with my Masonic brothers here and everyone else who's in the room that I discovered. I think I've discovered. I really want you guys to tell me if you think this is a real thing or not. During ritual.
So hi, this is for my Masonic brothers. This is a Masonic Con 2016, in case you didn't see that. All right. Gonna spill little beans here, guys. But then they're gonna add a little, inferences. We let the research speak, right? We don't critique people.
And specifically in the York Rite. And I was tipped off by two numbers. I'm going to share that with you. And I think what it has done is unlock the final key or the final code to the runestone that, in my mind, explains everything within the inscription. And I really mean that. I think this is the final piece to the puzzle, at least as far as the inscription goes. But I don't have time to go into too much detail.
All right, guys. So let me know. Can you guys understand what he's saying? The audio again was really bad. It was worse than this. There was a lot of background noise. So I try to fix it up. I try to separate his vocal a little bit and raise it up. Let me know. Can you guys understand what he's kind of saying? I hopefully you do. If not, I'll skip this whole video. But guys, there's mad drop in this video. I'll skip the whole video and go to the next one. The audio. It's mild, yes. Okay, you guys can hear it. All right. So just to have background, right? Like now, Scott has done a lot of research on the Kensington Runestone. That's something, one of the main themes about his, studies. This is it right here, guys. All right, so I'm gonna open it so you guys can see it. This is what they found. All right, this is what they found, right? In the Americas. In the Americas, official. This is, they try to downplay it, but they found this, and they know it's like a very old type of Swedish writing. Oh, we're talking about old. So nobody that came in from the European times should have known, or anybody here is supposed to know this language, right? It's a very, and as you guys can see, they'll call it Swedish, but you guys can see how it can look a lot like the paleo, right? It can look like the paleo, the block pictograph. You see a lot of these symbols in our, petroglyphs around America. So, guys, you gotta have context, right? Like we have a deeper understanding, all right? But that's what they're talking about, right? And so this was found in Minnesota, right? In Minnesota, all right? That's what they're talking about. Just want to have context, okay? So that's, he's done a lot of research. He has the show, guys, America Unearthed. I think it's on History Channel and all that. But you can't show those because those are, television. We know about that. So we're reacting to this great little PowerPoint, home video. Again, educational purposes, fair use. Right. So hopefully we can hear him. So now he's going to talk about some things, right? Let's go.
What I'm going to tell you just briefly, the runestone was found in 1898 by a Swedish immigrant farmer who was clearing trees in preparation for farming in greater Minnesota, about 15 miles away from the town of Alexandria. Kensington is way out there in western Minnesota. It's pretty remote. And Olaf was clearing trees with his two oldest sons, cut the roots off around the base of the tree, and then they tipped over this 25 to 30-year-old tree. Tightly wrapped in the roots directly below it was this 202-pound stone you saw in the first photo. It's important, I want everybody to read this inscription.
So he's talking about the guy who discovered it, the story. We can read on Wikipedia if you guys are interested, right? They found it under a tree and all that. So this is what he's showing, the Kensington stone right now.
When they first found it, they thought they had found, Olaf said they thought it was an Indian artifact, and eventually they realized it was a long inscription carved in Scandinavian runes. And it's carved on two sides. The other thing that's important is the person that carved this stone, who I maintain was a Cistercian monk traveling with the Templars in 1362, took a much larger stone that had been carried somewhere, presumably in the Kensington area, by glaciers, dropped it off, just like we have all around here, the boulders you guys have in the Northeast here, carried by glaciers, same as Minnesota, and they split it off. They split it down to roughly a 2-to-1 ratio, or a double square. Jim, you pointed out the double circle. It's basically the same thing. Anyway, starting on the face side, we have, it says here, and it starts with a number, something called a pentatic number, and that number is 8. 8 Gotlanders and 22 Northmen on this acquisition business, or taking up land from Vinland far to the west. We had a camp near 2 shelters, 1 day's journey north of the stone. We were fishing one day. After we came home, found 10 men red from blood and death, ABM, a Latin prayer prompt perhaps, maybe a Catholic prayer prompt, some people thought, maybe something else, safe from evil. On the split side that was created by the carver, and which was the side where we took samples to date the weathering of the inscription, which worked perfectly because that surface was created at the same time as the inscription. So we didn't have to damage the inscription when I did my weathering work. It says there are 10 men by the inlet sea to look after our ships. 14 days journey from this island, year 1362. This is 130 years before Christ didn't set foot on the continent that already had millions of people living here, right? So in July of 2000, I was approached by the Runestone Museum to do a forensic study on the Runestone. And I used to have a lot more and darker hair back then. That's what this research will do to you. Anyway, I'd love to go into the details, but I'm going to ask you to just, as a leap of faith, as my brothers, accept the fact that the results of the weathering work, I can say with 100% certainty that the weathering of the inscription is older than 200 years after comparing the weathering of the stone with tombstones out here on the East Coast. So I could find tombstones old enough to push it back as far as we could. Same mineral, same grain size, same weathering environment, all the criteria fits. And because all of the micas are gone on the runestone and they begin to come off the tombstones here, that's where it's older than, because once the minerals start to come off, the experiment is over. But that's from 1898 when Olaf pulled it out of the ground, 200 years before that, because it hasn't been in a weathering environment since, which means it cannot possibly be the late 19th century hopes that everybody claimed. And if it's not that, what else do you have?
All right, so he's just basically explaining that the archaeology and geology shows how old this is. You can't create 200 years of mica degradation. That's what they're showing here. That's natural effect, guys. That so it's a lot older than what they want to admit. He's talking to masons, scientists, professors. He deals with college, university professors, and he does projects. He's on History Channel. Even though we're gonna see in the next presentation, he's gonna talk about what happens when they don't agree. But anyways, right now he's with his brothers. Remember, his Masonic brothers, as he said in the beginning. Fair use. It's just what he said. I'm quoting him.
It must be genuine. And once you say that, as I did, I said that everything in that inscription has to be consistent with the 14th century. The rules of dialect, the grammar, the dating, everything has to be consistent. Of course, all the academics in Sweden said that's wrong, and because they had never seen it before. Well, just because you haven't seen something before doesn't mean that it didn't exist. The geology, the logic told me it had to exist. I took 5 trips to Sweden over a period of 2.5 years, and we found everything. Of course, you think they would have been, wow, this is great, we should take a closer look. No, all it did was just piss them off, because I came over from America and found what was in their backyard. If you don't bother to look, you're not going to find anything. So you guys know how that goes. But I can tell you, we found it all. What we also found was that the majority of the evidence that was missing from the database on the Runestone was on an island called Gotland in the middle of the Baltic Sea, which was part of Sweden then, and it is now. It was the center of trade in the Baltic region. There was a lot of different influences, including a heavy Germanic influence, which we also see influencing the stone. But what's important about this is that there are 99 churches on that island. I went to every one of them, and I saw some incredible things I can't go into right now. But what we know in the 14th century is that the only person who would have been capable of carving an inscription of that complexity and length had to have been a member of the clergy, because the common people weren't educated by design. So what clergy did we have on Gotland? One, the Cistercians. Well, who are these guys? Well, I had no idea, but I plunged in because as a forensic investigator, what I do for a living is follow the evidence. And if you follow the evidence and you have enough of it, it will take you to the truth. Oh, wait a minute. We don't care about that, right?
That's what we do here. We follow the evidence. So that's what I'm saying. The research speaks for itself. Inferences and opinions and guessing, assumptions, hypotheses, those are not absolute things. There's still doubt in that. Those ain't facts, bottom line. So, we do the same things. What I'm trying to point out to people that think we're not doing that and we're supposedly blackwashing history. It's more like correcting history.
You're off for just a second. I'm not a lawyer, by the way. That was the cheap shot. So anyway, what I found out, but Yes, they are. Um, so on God, we got the Cistercians. Well, who are the Cistercians? The white monks who were led to prominence in 1113 by a guy named Saint Bernard de Clairvaux, who joined the order with 30 family members, including some of those original 9 knights who were his uncles that went to the Holy Land, dug under the temple, and of course that's the stuff of legend that we've all heard about. Well, the question is it legend or is it true? Anyway, he was who I consider to be one of the most important historical figures in the world, and the person who taught me more about this period in history in the 12th century and before, Bernard de Clairvaux, and what really happened, this coup d'etat is what it really was from Alan's books, Alan Butler. And I'm not kidding when I say this, but when we're all dead, history's going to look back, and he's not going to be appreciated in his lifetime for the work that he's done, but in the future he will be. So make sure you shake his hand, and if you want to learn about the Cistercians and the Knights Templar, the real story, that's the guy to talk to. So speaking of them, how many of you know that it was Bernard who wrote the charter for the Knights Templar Order, and a papal bull was passed at the city of Troyes, which Alan and Jen will be talking about in a little bit, that made them an official order, and the rest is history.
So you guys know about the Templars and all that, and what they say, official history, and there's a deeper history to them as well. Who were they? They were in France. Who was in France? A lot of those were cryptos, guys, believe it or not. Trust me. Practicing Muslims. And they were calling Baphomet was really Mahomet, not Baphomet. There's just a switch of words. Anyways, let's continue with this. Let's not get off subject. The KRS dating code, he says, confirms 1362. He's saying their own supposed testing, right, that they use, confirms this was created in the 1300s. So obviously like Columbus got here 1400s, right? Supposedly, right? 1914. So that's why it's controversial, guys. You see, it doesn't fit. But how many inscriptions have we found here all over the Americas? You know, it's not just this one. This ain't the only runestone. But let's keep going.
Some of the things that we found during our close examination of the runestone is that there's hidden codes within it. One of them is a dating code used in the medieval Eastern table, and the date that is embedded, encoded within the inscription is 1362.
Hidden codes embedded. Listen to what he's saying. This is what he's telling his brothers, right? All right.
Date that we know was carved on it, and the question is, why would they do that? Well, to protect the date that everybody knows about from alteration, because the date was important. This is like your PIN number on your credit card. This is a practice that the Templars were known to do with their letters of credit. These are some of the symbols that were anomalies that nobody could understand, nobody could explain. We think this explains at least these marks. Why would they do that? Well, I think the runestone is a land claim. It says it right on it. Acquisition business or taking up land. And of course, the date is part of what would be so important. This was when we were here. So it's a land claim by this Templar Cistercian party coming over from Europe. And there's all kinds of theories as to why that is, but I think we know. They wanted to establish a place where they could do all the things that we now do: free thought, freedom of religion, separation of church and state, separation of powers in our government. And this was the first attempt. It wasn't an attempt. This was the first marker for that land claim that would eventually become the United States of America that Janet and Alan will talk about. There's also a Grail code. Some of these dots and strokes that the carver added after he carved the inscription. If you take the first 4 runes or letters that are singled out in the inscription, read in sequence as you read the inscription, G-R-A-L. In medieval Old Swedish, that spells Graal or Grail, that Grail, which is consistent with the Cistercians who wrote the Grail legends. What can I tell you? There it is.
So the Grail, that's what he's saying. It translates to, right? Like, but you know, a lot of it, you see, again, it looks like a lot of block Hebrew, Paleo-Hebrew pictograph, right? Ancient symbols we have here. You see the X, the Tav, all that, you know. All right, so let's go. But he's telling you something, right? In between, you guys, you know, discern.
So those are the first two codes. But now I think I have found the third code that I am now calling the ritual code, which was in the York Rite degrees. How many York Rite people have been through the York Rite?
Oh,
Okay, quite a few of you. So you guys will recognize this. By the way, our Grand Master John Gans said I could talk about this, so don't get mad at me. I'm not giving away anything that I don't think is a problem. Anyway, so in the York Rite degrees, you have basically four sections: the Blue Lodge, then you have the Royal Arch, then you have the Crypto Council, and then the chapter degrees, and eventually Knights Templar. It was within, and this is the way it goes, but it was within the cryptic degrees that this discovery was made, specifically in the Select Master degree.
you guys hearing? Oh, all right. So I ain't saying anything. Let's go.
So I'm watching the ritual, which basically deals with the building of the first temple. And I'm watching the degree, and of course, one of the things that we learn about this degree is what goes inside the Ark of the Covenant. And I think we all can appreciate and understand that one of the things that goes into the Ark are the 10 Commandments. And then the ritual goes on, and then eventually one of the 33rd, the Scottish Rite, did a lecture. And in the lecture, he was talking about the construction of the secret vault. Now, the secret vault has 9 arches, which are below the altar inside the temple, directly beneath the Sanctum Sanctorum, or the Holy of Holies, and these 9 arches are down below. And the entrance is inside of King Solomon's secret room. It says the 9th arch was built by the 3 Grand Masters, King Solomon, Hiram, King of Tyre, and Hiram Abiff, who was the master architect that oversaw the construction of the temple. Then the lecture said the other 8 arches were built by 22 men from Gebel. And I went, 8 and 22? Those are the first 2 numbers on the Runestone. And I didn't hear another thing after that. And as soon as the ritual was over, I went to my Masonic mentor. I said, John, is there a ritual book for this? He said, yeah. I go, give me that. So I started reading, and it goes on. Then it says, after they single out the 22 guys, it says, and then, I forget the wording, but it talks about Ashishar and Adoniram. 2 more guys. Well, the next number is 2 shelters. That's 3 in a row. So then the ritual goes on, and it talks about Xenia. I can't say it, I'll just admit it right now. What is it? Zero? That guy.
So, you know, we respect the interpretations, yeah. But doesn't mean we may not have our own interpretations, right? So, you know, we pick the babies out, guys. We pick out the drop, you know, we dodge the hijacks. You know how it is. And again, fair use. Don't censor me. I'm doing what every other YouTuber is doing. All right, let's go.
So then it talks about Z-Man. Good Irish name. One day's, 2 shelters, 1 day's journey north of the stone. Now 1. And I'm like, that's 4 in a row. It can't be a coincidence. Well, then when you read the ritual book, it says the secret word, well, I'll come back to it. This is where it occurs in the book. Well, then you know that Z-Man finds the entrance, he goes down in, and he finds the secret vault. Well, King Solomon says, what are you doing down here? You're not supposed to be here. And they kill one of the 2 guards. I think it's Ashishar. That guy. And so now we're down to 1 guy. So we got 1 as the next number. I mean, I'm kind of picking and choosing a little bit, but this is how it occurs within the ritual. Well, then, if you've seen the ritual, it stops in the book, But you know what happens? He finds the ark. And then it says 10 men red with blood and death. And in the ritual, it gets violent, right? I just remember in our ritual, there was blood everywhere.
All right. We just letting them, we just absorbing. I just want to read what it says here, in case you have trouble. Just one. It says ritual code on KRS is the select master degree, Masonic Templar. That the X numbers archers built by 22 men, 2 guards, 1 guard, killed as 1 other person. Zerubbabel discovers secret vault with the Ark and 10 Commandments, spears, or the second Ark. HA's body discovered after days. So that's what it says there.
And so I'm like, this can't be coincidence. This is everything is lining up. Well, then you go to the split side. 10 men by the sea with our ships. Now we know that we have, and what was placed down on the wall was a copy of all the secret treasures, probably the originals. And I believe that this was a secret that was held within the tightest circle, the Grand Masters, from that time on. The question was, is that real or is it alibi? And I think it's real, of course. But the second 10 can either be the second ark, or it can be the 10 spheres from the Kabbalah in the
Again, context if you just arrived. This footage is old from 2016. It's like a home video recording, and it was way worse. The audio was way worse. I fixed it as much as I can. No, there's no subtitles. All right. If you can't hear it, well, maybe you can fast forward to much later on the video. Obviously not right now because I'm live, but we're gonna show a different one where it's more understandable. The audio is way better. So thank you for your patience. Try to see, pay close attention so you can make out what he's saying.
In the tree of life in the Kabbalah. I'm not sure, but we got plenty of 10s to make 2 on our inscription. But here's the key one, 14. And what happens is in this degree, you are actually hearing the beginning of the story, and in the blue lodge, when you raised as Master Masons, you're getting the end of the story. So it's almost like the prequel comes after the end of the story. And I won't go into the details of the 3rd degree, but all I know is that when Hiram is discovered, it's 14 days after he went missing. Are you kidding me? So, what is all this? All I know is I got 8 numbers in a row. I'd have better luck picking the lottery numbers. I mean, seriously. Okay, so this is the other part that's interesting. In the ritual, it says that the secret work was performed at 9 at night till midnight, when all prying eyes were closed and clean. Well, 9 plus how many equals 12? 9 lines on the face side, 3 on the side for a total of 12. Coincidence? Maybe. Well, we learn about the Kabbalah in Masonry. That's not a secret. And so I started looking into it because I knew nothing about it. And I loved it lecture this morning. It was wonderful. It's comprised of 10 spheres that create 22 paths. For a total, they rest on 3 pillars. For a total of 32 emanations. And I so badly wanted to ask you about the 11th sphere, but I knew I just couldn't. But there is one. When you reach a certain level, that creates a 33rd hidden emanation.
Okay. Yeah. Little drop. Look how they add in the.
Well, for the Scottish writers, now you know where the degrees come, and the 33rd is the honorary inspector general. And this has got to be a connection. This can't be coincidence. On the runestone, 22 is 30. Plus 2 is 32. Plus 1 is 33. And that section stands alone as the first paragraph or first chapter in the story, if you will. And then they kind of start clean. Is this yet another coincidence? What was it that said there are no coincidences in Freemasonry? I'm starting to believe that. One of the things I published in my last book, Akhenaten Founding Fathers, was something that was told to me right before we went to press. And I was talking to somebody and he said, man, that's really interesting. They did 22 book dexes on the runestone. I went, 22? And then I started looking at the other odd characters, the G rune, which is backwards. There are 8 of those. There are 10 W runes that had never been seen before. There are 14 individual numbers.
Never been seen before. You heard that, right?
And there are 22 book dexes. Could this be a confirmation code? And where did that come from? It came from the Bible. In the Torah, God said appears 10 times. God's name occurs 22 more times. And Elohim occurs 32 times. So this tradition of confirmation codes is also in this Hebrew Jewish mysticism, which the Templars and the Cistercians absolutely were into and passed on to us. I do. The number 8, there are 8 of those numbers that are in this code. And the first one is the number 8. Why 8? Because 8 is the number of the deity. You talked about Yod He Vav He. Well, why that? Because of that concept, you also talked about gematria, which is the science of numbers, which is a concept in the Kabbalah, right? Well, why is that? Well, you didn't go into this, you just mentioned it briefly, but here's an example of a manuscript from Iceland that was hidden away. People were secretly practicing the Kabbalah in Iceland. And actually around 1600, the church sent agents to round up all this stuff. And anybody found using this was burned at the stake in Iceland. But they saved it all, and now it's being published on the internet in the last 6 months. And all the stuff you talked about, you'll go crazy. And I'll give you the links. Anyway.
So, if you guys, for those who know about my thought videos, there's some thought shit. Alright, so you gotta dodge the hijack, guys. Like that, they're getting all this from the supposed translation of this runestone. They call it runestone that they found here in the Americas. All right, but still, they know it's deep knowledge in it. Again, interpretations could be different. Fair use, man. Fair use, educational purpose. Let's go.
Does that not look like a hooked X? It's the first letter of the Hebrew alphabet, and it's used for A on the runestone. But the numbers correspond to each Hebrew letter, 1 through 10, 20, 30, 40, 100, 200. You can see the progression, and there's other numbers. I won't go into the details there, but the way that we do this gematria is you will take a word. For example, Yod He Vav He is Yod He Vav He. Each of those Hebrew letters corresponds to a number. And in gematria, using a concept called numerology reduction, you add up all the numbers, you come up with a number, then you take the 2 numbers, if it's a 2-digit number, and then you add those 2 together, you reduce it down to a single digit. In this case, the name of the deity reduces down to 8. You see how that works? Jesus, Yeshua, spelled in Hebrew, that's the same thing.
2 different frequencies there. Jesus and Jehoshua, 2 different frequencies. That's why I tell you guys, like, yeah, people can have different interpretations, All right, let's get going.
That's why the number 8 is so sacred. And usually at the top of most religious houses, you'll see the octagonal architecture, typically with the steeple, calling out the deity or us trying to get up there. But number 8 is important, and it's important on the Runestone. The 10s are probably referencing either the 10 Commandments, the 2, or the 10 Sephiroth on the Tree of Life. But the 14, this is key. Because what are we all talking about? This sun worship you talked about. We're talking about Freemasonry. We're talking about the Egyptian mysteries. At the core of all of it is this concept of resurrection, right?
So there you go. Freemasonry, we're talking about so-called Egyptian mysteries, Hermetics. Hermetics, alchemy. You know, with that, you can check out my thought videos. All right, let's go.
What is that? Well, it's being reborn, right? As a Mason, we're reborn with new knowledge, and we see the world in a different way, and it has to do with symbolism and many other things. But this is not something that's unique to Masonry. We inherited it going all the way back to Egypt and beyond. But I'm calling it the Isis-Osiris mysteries.
Yeah, what Egypt? The real Egypt, right? They got all the knowledge from. You already know.
And if you know the legend of Isis and Osiris, at one point Osiris goes out and he's killed by his jealous brother Set, who cuts his body up into how many pieces? 14. And then Isis, his wife, goes looking for his body. He finds 13 pieces. She finds 13 pieces, the number of the sacred feminine. M is the 13th letter in the alphabet. The whole thing I can tell you about that. But then she doesn't find his feather. Imagine that. But according to whichever mystery you read, she then creates one either out of gold or out of honey. She impregnates herself. Horus is born. He grows up to be Osiris, and the whole thing starts over again. And really, it's an allegory for the cycle of life on the planet: birth in the spring, death in the fall, resurrection on the winter solstice. And those.
That's the drop. It's talking about nourishment, crops, create. Like, you see what he's just saying? Like, just like when we talk about the corn mother, how they turn that into Isis. Isis, where is Isis in a connection to, Osiris and Isis connection? They're both corn deities. They're Westerners. So you guys know the backdrop.
3 days that Jesus spent in the tomb is nothing more than an allegory for the 3 days that the sun stands still on the winter solstice, and then what happens? It's resurrected. So he gets resurrected, we get resurrected, but we also see this same story played out in every Catholic church around the world in the Stations of the Cross. And how many of those do we have? 14. It's the resurrection story, which is the same story that every culture tells in one way or another throughout time and throughout the world.
Mm-hmm.
The old runes. This is another mystery. This is what the old runes are supposed to look like, angled down like this. But the carved rune, in 17 of the 20 occurrences of the old rune, has made them 90 degrees. Maybe this is his way of acknowledging the concept of squaring our actions by the square of virtue. But not all of them. There were 3 more that he carved, using these strange ellipses, or ovals with an end rune in them and 2 dots above them, almost like a crown. Runes are basically straight lines, and they lend themselves to carving in stone. That's why they use them to carve in stone. But making curved lines is very difficult. So this took extra work, but they are symbolic of something. Perhaps the 3 grand masters. Maybe it's the 3 pillars on the tree of life.
Perhaps, maybe, probably.
I don't know what the answer is, but this whole rule of 3.
I don't know the answer. That's his words.
I don't have to say any more to the people in this room. It's vitally important. Jim's column. Now I'm going to tell you what it really is. This octagonal architecture is Templar. It goes back to, in my opinion, it goes back to Solomon's Temple in Jerusalem, which is octagonal. You see those octagonal structures all over. Rick, you were the first one to show me those pictures. The Templars spent a lot of time there. They brought it back with them. They used that architecture. in their most sacred structures, their lavatorians. And lavatorians are where they would wash the Cistercians and the Templars before and after bathing. Their heads, hands, and feet was very important. It's very sacred, and they're all octagonal in shape. So this became, and the Templar cross has 8 points, right? You take the cross, you put it in the middle, it cuts those 8 points. This is absolutely Templar architecture, Cistercian architecture. And Jim and I shared this discovery together. It was his picture that sparked something in me to realize that egg that you talked about, that John Dee felt was so important, and of course it goes way back, the Orphic egg inside the Newport Tower, the only true keystone on the inside, well, the most prominent true keystone on the inside of the tower. Notice how it's not centered in the archway. I'll come back to that in a second. But one of the things that was an amazing discovery, and Jim, you started it, and I'm going to give you all the credit in the world. This happens only on December 21st, which is my birthday, and my wife Janet says is the shortest, darkest day of the year.
So guys, talking about these towers in North America, right, in the States, and that resemble the exact same construction of medieval age, Middle Ages towers in Europe, Asia, and all that. It's the exact same thing, same material. A lot of them are more sophisticated, still standing, but they try to give it different dates. And now he's saying this is definitely Templars who built it. You know, that's inference, that part. But you know, this is Greater Ireland, just in case you guys didn't. This is yeah. When they say all those mythical lands to the west in the Atlantic, yeah, they were talking about the Americas. Navigation, seafaring people were real, and a lot of them were from the Americas. But anyways, this is what he's saying. He's talking about the alignment from the winter solstice, December 21st, how the light comes in. Then he added his birthday.
Thanks, honey. Love you. And this is what happens. That south window that Jim talked about creates a light box that at 8 o'clock goes through the west window, creating that alignment that Bill Penhallow discovered. And this is Jim, and this is great. We don't agree, but we shared one of the most important discoveries. It's resurrection in the Newport Tower. That's what this is. I want you guys.
Yeah, he just made an absolute statement. That's what it is. But earlier he said, I don't know. So either way, fair use, right? Don't come at me.
To see something else on the outside of the tower, and that same archway back to back with that keystone is another keystone. But in light of the royal arch, now that I have been illuminated, initiated into the craft, into royal arch masonry, I stand outside there and I see a lot of them. Do you guys see what I see? The notched keystone, which was given, which is symbolic of the honor given to the master mason who was given the honor to put the final keystone inside of a structure. He would notch that stone off of his mason's mark on top. But
You guys see what he's saying, and that's the tower in the Americas, right? Okay.
it's the royal arch, and there you see it right there. But here's something else we discovered about the same time as the illumination with Jim. I was standing outside looking at that keystone, talking to it, and I said, "What are you pointing to?" And I turned and looked west, and it hit me like that. I knew exactly what it was. And in light of David's presentation with the long-range alignments, yours is 6,000 miles, mine's only about 1,500. But remember how those keystones were not centered in the archway? They were off 2.5 degrees. One thing I've learned about these guys, it's not an accident. They did it for a reason. This is what I think the reason is. You stand in the middle of the tower and you draw a line through those 2 keystones, and it goes out into space. You know where it goes? It goes to Kensington, Minnesota, and I'm not kidding. It goes right through there. Now, is that what they intended? I think so. Decide for yourself. But what's interesting, thinking about it allegorically, is that Kensington, Minnesota is the geographic center of North America. And that's where they placed this Kensington keystone, which symbolically represents the royal arch of the final sanctuary of the New Jerusalem, if you will, of North America.
Okay. Again, we may have different interpretations for all this. Let's go.
That's the story I'm going with, but there it is. So let's go back now and let's try to figure out what's real and what's not real, what's allegory and what should we be paying attention to. If you're initiated, you know how to separate it out. If you're not, you'll never figure it out. So acquisition business, Far West, that's all good. The dating code, that's all good. The Grail code, nothing changes with this new discovery. But it says from Vinland far to the west. For a long time, I always just said Vinland far to the west. I mean, you think about the context, they're claiming the land from Vinland, which is right here, by the way, all the way. I think they're claiming the whole continent. And I think that's it right there. We don't have to go any further. We take out the continent. We made it to the middle. I think you also have this. This part is changing. In light of the secret vault of the ritual in Jerusalem, the Templars went there, they dug under the Temple Mount for 9 years? And then they found some stuff and they took it back and the world changed. That's a fact. And then, of course, people, the legend is that the treasures were brought over here and they put it at Oak Island. It's nothing on Oak Island. Break into that. Look, the Templars aren't stupid, okay? They don't leave their stuff laying around for two brothers to find. Nothing against the brothers, but they moved it. The question is where? Well, in talking with certain native tribes, they sent it out west. Maybe 1 day's journey and 14 days is really degrees. If it is, 1 north, 14 west, 14 west, 1 day north, end up at the same place, right? Maybe it's directions to the secret vault. A good friend of ours, Bill Mannix, proposed that the secret vault is in Montana. And he knows exactly where it is. And I'm going to let Bill tell you that story someday. But he's a Freemason, Knights Templar. He's also Native American. He's had a Ojibwa, Algonquin Ojibwa. And he said, of all of my Masonic jewels and medals, he said, the most important thing to me is my sacred pouch, which contains tobacco, sage, sweetgrass, and cedar. Boy,
You guys hear that?
talk about pressure.
All right. Again, there's original, and there's the duplicates and Let's go.
And the hidden secret fifth element. I said, what's that, Bill? He said, the red claw of the Templars, our brothers. Remember, you're not going to do anything on this continent back then without the natives letting you. And if you don't believe me, talk to him. Because what did you do when those white people came? What? We killed them. Okay. That came from him, not me. Okay. So, Bill is Knights Templar. He's going to be the Grand Master for all of Canada. So, but these are his native brothers right here. And Mark is the shaman that took him through the degrees. And he took me, the rituals. And this in my Akhenaten book, I compared the rituals. The Smithsonian wrote the Daywin rituals, 135 pages in great detail. And I studied the Masonic rituals before I was a Mason. I compared them. They're the same. Exactly the same. The first, according to the Smithsonian, the first missionaries and fur traders to come to this continent said the natives were already doing this, which tells me as an investigator either the rituals developed independently on separate continents, independent of each other, which is not likely, or there was contact. Well, the obvious is there was contact. According to the natives, the Algonquin prophecies say it's time to share what they know. Is that your prophecy say the same thing? Okay, God, I love having you. Not just for that. And I did a sweat with Mark, and we did the creation story, a shortened version of the creation story. He could have gone on for hours, but I didn't catch a plane. And we heated up the stones. We sit around the campfire for hours. It's wonderful. You get to know each other, and they're vetting you out to see if you're even worthy of this, right? And we did some healing, and then I got my questions answered, and it was amazing. I really appreciate the fact that they did that. Guess how many stones were in the fire? 9 stones.
Little bit of the draw. We're going to talk about this when it comes to American Indian so-called Freemason. And he just made a point there about the lodge, sweat lodge, and lodge, how they call their things lodge. Again, there's original, then there's duplicates. And don't mind me, I'm just working out in the background while we, watch and listen. Feel free to join me in the workout. We're going to be here a while.
This is total speculation, but we think that Thomas Jefferson gave Meriwether Lewis secret instructions about the secret vault. What we know is that in July of 1806, Meriwether Lewis, who was a Freemason, separated from Clark at the time, who was not a Freemason, near the Big Fork River. And he went straight up the Big Fork River where he crossed over the divide. And at that point, I can tell you, if Bill's right about where the secret vault is, he was less than a day's ride from the secret vault. And his memoirs get it's not a lot in there during this time, for about a week. So he was in the area. And by the way, he was, Sacagawea probably plays a role in this story. Her brother was chief of the Kurimeo. He was the chief of the Kurimeo, right? Huh? Of the Shoshone, but his name was Kurimeo. That's right, yeah. And he was the one that introduced him supposedly to, I'm screwing this up, I apologize. Introduced him to the chief of the Blackfoot, and according to the natives I've talked to in Canada, they say it's the Blackfoot that are guarding the vault. So he was there. He was looking for the chief of the Blackfoot. The question is why? Thomas Jefferson was the ambassador to France, 1785 to 1789. He says the 3 most brilliant men that ever lived were Francis Bacon, Isaac Newton, and John Locke. All 3 of them were Rosicrucians. And the Rosicrucians are a direct outgrowth of the Knights Templar. So we think somebody whispered in Thomas Jefferson's ear about the location of the vault. He had a secret code between he and Meriwether Lewis so they could communicate. And nobody knows what that secret communication was. We think he told them to go look for it. And apparently it's still there. It's all right. Now.
All right, guys. So you hear all the crazy stories, all the beans he's spilling. Hey, just so you know, Wayne's cool, man. Wayne's cool, man. That's an elder. All right. Cape Verdean elder. He's cool, man. I saw the message, Wayne. Just, reach out to me in private, Thank you.
Last thing. And I left out some slides because it'll go too long. But what I think I could convince you, and I don't want to offend anybody here, this is my thesis, and I'm just, based on the data, there is a tomb in southern Jerusalem called the Templar tomb. There are 10 ossuaries in there, 7 inscribed with names. One of them says, Jesus, son of Joseph. Another one says, James, son of Joseph, brother of Jesus. Another one says, Matthew, Joseph, Joseph. Judah, son of Jesus. Maria. And the last one, carved in Greek, says, Mariamne the Mara. Mariamne is a pet name for Mary Magdalene found only in the Acts of Philip. The Mara is a title of honor, as in Lord, Master, or Queen. Only 6 ossuaries have been found with the Mara honor. 3 were male. This is the 3rd one that's female. On the lid of that ossuary is a symbol that's on my ring. It's a hooked X on Jesus' ossuary. It hasn't been published yet. And a Tau cross. You showed the Tau on Isaac's. That's on his ossuary. We just saw that in those papers that the hooked X is a symbol for the Hebrew Aleph. The Tau is the last letter in the Aramaic Hebrew alphabet. Alpha, Omega, beginning and end. And it's on Jesus's ashray. But it's a symbol of Jesus. And if the Templars went to Jerusalem and they dug under the temple, I think I could convince you.
Again, interpretations, right? We may have our own. So let's get doing a little closing right here, right? Shout out to Scott, but you know, fair use, educational purposes.
That they also went into the tomb and they saw the hooked X. And the hooked X represents Jesus. So if we're right that these guys were the bloodline descendants of Jesus and Mary, which I am convinced they were, then shouldn't Jesus and Mary be on the runestone too? Because I've always said that the claim was not made in the name of a king, a monarch, certainly not a pope. I was wrong about that. It was made in the name of a king. He was fishing one day is a standalone sentence on the runestone.
All right, guys. So this part is literally almost done. We got like a couple seconds left, and he's just doing his little closing. But he did a little drop there. We're gonna go to on the next video. The next video, guys, a lot more drop. It's more newer. It's after he wrote his book Hooked X, which we're gonna read eventually. So this is before, right now, where he's doing this with his Masonic brothers, as he saw in the beginning. This little PowerPoint home video, fair use, educational purposes. You know, this is before that. This is way back in 2016. Now we're gonna get a more updated PowerPoint presentation. All right, in the next video. Hope you're enjoying so far.
Well, yesterday I talked about the Kensington Runestone, and I hope I made a favorable impression. And as I said, Dick and I published our book, The Kensington Runestone, Compelling New Evidence, 3 years ago in November. And immediately after the book came out, what Dick decided to do was go in a little different direction, and I went in a different direction. He wanted to work with the academic scholars. And I'm just going to tell you guys what happened to Professor Henrik Williams after we were in Sweden in 2003, the first time we brought the stone there. He was called into the office of the dean of the college in Uppsala University. And you have to understand, this is the top runologist in the world today. He owns the #1 position. And
You guys hear that? He knows somebody up there in the universities and all that. That's just what I'm trying to explain to you. But he's finding out. He's eventually finding out. Can't be. It's not part of the curriculum. They ain't gonna accept you. So he's telling you the story of his friend, who's the top. Listen, #1 guy, and even he got rejected and kind of like ridiculed and not really taken serious because of what they were saying about ancient America. So listen to what he's gonna say.
Dean said, Mr. Williams, if you have enough time to work in the Kensington Runestone, you have time for more work. So he gave him additional administrative duties, and that was a 3-year sentence. And if you know Henrik like I do, that's the last thing in the world that he would want to do. And it was punishment for even, you know, daring to do this. So he's finally done with that. And now he and Dick are working together. They're about ready to publish a paper on the Runestone. And I think it's going to go well. But this is what we're up against. And you guys probably have your own stories, but this is my story. And I got to tell you, I think it's the biggest bunch of crap I've ever seen in my life. But I'm, you know, I run my own business. I'm not beholden to anybody. I can do what I want. But to see people punished and criticized and ridiculed, I don't even know what to say. It's crazy. So anyway, the Kensington Runestone was great. And so now Dick has said, look, I know you're going to talk about, you're going to work on these other things, and you're going to talk about Templars, and I'm going to talk about Knights Templar today, because from my perspective, they're the only people that I think you know, the only plausible people that could be involved with these stones, and I'll explain why in a second. But for him to be able to work with Henrik, he could not associate himself with that. Right or wrong, it was the right decision. So I had to go it alone, but I certainly haven't gone it alone. There are a lot of people in this room, Dave Brody. I can't tell you how many people have assisted, and it's been wonderful, because like raising a child, you know that old saying, it takes a village? Well, it's the same thing with this research, and believe me, there are a lot of people that have contributed and continue to contribute, and I welcome any and all input. So, What is it about the runestone that got me curious? Well, what it was this mysterious symbol that you saw, the hooked X. And so the logical place I thought to go was to where there were some other stones found in North America. Minnesota is where I started my journey, and the next stop was to a place called Pompum Beach, which is on the coast of Maine, and about a mile inland to a little place called Spirit Pond. And it was here in 1971 that 3 runestones were found, and this is a picture of the discovery site area, and I'm standing on a man-made dam here that's holding back the water, and it drops a couple, 3-4 feet when the tide is out, and when the tide is up, this area is saline. And right here is where a man who was looking for arrowheads and other artifacts sat down to smoke a cigarette, and he looked down on the ground and he saw a rock sticking out, and it had what looked like characters on it, and he dug them out and he found these 3 stones. Now, I talked yesterday about the stone holes, the triangular stone holes. I was a little bit hurried there at the end. It was my own fault.
All right, guys. So again, this is a whole other artifact. These are all other artifacts, not the Kensington one, but other ones showing the same type of markings. Again, in the Americas, right? This is the Spirit Pond Runestones, and I've actually talked about this site in a lot of videos and shown what other stuff they found there. Not just this, but this is what he's talking about now.
But I will tell you that I've looked at a lot of artifacts over the last 3 years and sites on the East Coast. And I don't know why, but it seems like at every one of these sites, just about every one of these sites, these holes turn up. And just
right, everywhere in the East Coast, everywhere these sites, listen.
Like at many of these sites, and certainly at the runestone spot, there's a hole right there on the bedrock. This is a bedrock little projection into the water, and it's highly weathered. This is a coarse-grained granitic outcrop right here, and it exhibits very advanced weathering. It does have a triangular shape, just like the other holes, which indicates it was likely made with a straight chisel. Now, is it related to the runestones? I don't know, but you know, that old association where there's smoke, there's fire. And I have to do this. It reminds me of an analogy my grandfather gave me. He was a Canadian, by the way. My mother was born and raised here. And he said, you know what, Scotty? If there's empty beer cans laying around, there's some drinking going on. I love that line. I'm sorry, but
that was funny.
Walter Elliott was the one that found these stones, and there's a number of people, Sue Carlson, Roz Strong, and other people associated with NERA that knew Walter very well. He was a member of NERA, and I have to tell you that I don't think anybody has seriously said that he was responsible for carving these stones, and there's no way that he was. But anyway, these are the stones. There was also an amulet that was found that has a interesting cross on it. It also has some runes on the back side, but I'm going to focus on the 3 main stones. This is what we call the Spirit Pond inscription stone. It has the hooked X being used for the A sound, and clearly this is the connection that ties it to the Kensington Runestone, in my opinion. But there's other information, and I'll go through the translation in a second here. This is the back side of the stone. There are 16 lines total, very long inscription. There are pentatic numbers, just like the Kensington Runestone. And I've studied these stones. I actually was given permission to take a small sample. We did some X-ray diffraction work and some elemental mapping. And I can tell you that this is a laminated mudstone comprised of quartz, feldspar, and clay minerals, mostly illite and kaolinite, and halite. Well, being that far from the salt water, there's no surprise there. But the problem with this mineralogy is that basically it's made up of rock that other rocks break down into. So it really doesn't have anywhere to go as far as weathering. And unfortunately, I really can't do much with this. And I hate to say that, but that's the way it is. Here's some of the analysis data here. And because of the high clay content, it's going to be tough to study these. The other thing that's interesting, and I did a very detailed photo study just like I did on the runestone, you see those little holes at the bottom of those word separators? And for those of you that don't know, on these runestones, after they were done making a word or carving a word, they put a 2-dot word separator aligned vertically, and this meant basically we're done with this word, we're starting another one. But you can see these little pinholes at the bottom that are smaller in diameter. Walter said he cleaned out the inscription with a pocket knife. Does that sound familiar? Olaf did the same thing. So anyway, you can decide for yourself, but this tells us that we had an original inscription. Unfortunately, he did a better job than Olaf did, and there really isn't a heck of a lot for me to look at as far as original surfaces. As far as the translation goes, it appears to be a ship's log that, or a report that includes several names either of ships or people's names, or perhaps both, we don't know.
We got an ancient inscription with ancient writing found in Americas, and he's literally telling us a ship log. Wow.
There are 3 pedantic numbers. The number 11 appears twice, the number 12, and the number 17 appears twice, and there are 3 Arabic 10s. All these numbers are used on the Kensington Runestone. Unfortunately, because there are not enough word separators, and the reason they probably did this is because many of the phrases were probably common phrases. Whoever the author was of this inscription, probably another Cistercian monk, didn't put in enough word separators really to make definitive translation possible. So
he's like, oh, maybe they did this, maybe they did that. What? Hey, I got another interpretation. What if it's an ancient rap? What if somebody wrote a rap in the stone, man? What if those were some lyrics, and you're trying to read it, you know, like reading a letter, and it's just lyrics, man. Maybe it's a poem, man. Maybe it's something else. This is what I'm saying, guys. You gotta understand. All those inscriptions, most of them look like Paleo Hebrew, man. Paleo.
I'm not even going to try, and unfortunately many people think they have it translated. I don't believe they're ever going to be able to have it figured out all the way, simply because we just don't know where to separate the runes into words.
See, he just admitted they don't know. They will never be able to translate it. Or is that gatekeeping? Is that tricking us into thinking it can be translated when it can, if we apply our knowledge to it? You understand?
And there are 3 Easter table dates on the stone. Now, the first analysis that was done by Professor Einar Haugen. I think he was from Harvard University. And one of the first things he said was that the date on this stone, if you look, you can see the word H-A-R is air, year. And then you see these 2 Arabic 10s, and he said that's the year 1010. Well, if it's 1010, he said there's many words that are very clearly on here, and some of the language can be interpreted, but he said this is not consistent with this time period. This is much later. And he said, therefore, it must be a hoax. Well, what Einar Haugen did not understand, and nobody's really understood very well, is the use of the Easter table dating method, which we talked about yesterday. Now, when Dick Nielsen looked at this, he said, no, this is year 10th column, 10th row. And then we see what looks to be, in his mind, and I agree with him, 3 U runes immediately afterward. I can tell you there isn't any word in old or modern Swedish that's spelled U. I know it looks like an M, but it's a ligature rune where they're tied together. It's called a bin rune. Well, a triple confirmation code would be consistent with the Cistercians, a Cistercian author, and certainly a Templar author. It's confirmed 3 times. When we go to the Easter table, if we go to the 10th column and down to the 10th row, you go across again. This has been converted to numbers and letter. B is the second letter in the runic alphabet, F, U, Thorn, O, R, K, and so forth. And you can see it's the letter U. So that's a confirmation that 1401 is the correct date. By the way, that column, the years are 1392 to 1419, and on the 10th row, that's 1401. There's another date at the end of the the front side of the inscription, year 10th column, 2 1s is 11, so that's 10th column, 11th row, that would be 1402. Now, these are some really amazing features, and if you look, you'll see there's little bars over these runes. That's an I rune, that's a T rune. Here's an N rune, and then we have a G or a K rune with a dot makes it a G, and we also have a bar over the R. Well, these little characters are much smaller than the Kensington Runestone, and these bars happen to correspond beautifully with the dotted runes found on a few places on the mainland, directly across from Gotland, which is where there was an abbey that fed many of the Cistercian monks over to Gotland, and we see the dotted runes all over Gotland. But on this particular slab at Ukna Church, where they found the dotted R, that was one of the examples I talked about yesterday, 7 of the 8 barred runes appear on just this inscription alone, and they correspond beautifully with the barred runes on the Spirit Pond inscription stone. And I think all it is because these characters are so small that the dots might be confused or missed, and they just used a bar. It was a unique trait, but they correspond beautifully. I don't know how a forger would, first of all, know about these dotted runes, let alone be clever enough to try to be cute here. The A rune, we see the same thing. And on the Kensington Runestone, we have some of the A runes have double dots, we call umlauts, which changes the A sound. And we have the same correspondence on the Spirit Pond, and they're being represented the same way. Another unique feature of this inscription is the use of double voweling. Here we have double A's, and here we have double O's. This is definitely a late medieval feature. How's a forger going to know about this? I don't know.
Exactly. That's a lot of the context they're missing with a lot of the artifacts they find here in the Americas, guys. They always try to say, oh, somebody forged it, but what is written on these artifacts? Nobody knew these things. A lot of the times, they hadn't discovered these languages at the time they found these artifacts. These ancient languages were later on classified. Like, let's say something pops up in the 1870s. They didn't determine what that language was in Europe until 1901. And they're finding things like that in these tablets, in these artifacts in the Americas, guys. I've shown you so many examples of this, the inscriptions and all that. And it's not just one type, it's all the ancient languages. All the ancient languages. And so that's what he's saying. How would a forger know this medieval thing in the time they found this? That wasn't even a thing back then. People weren't even writing about this stuff. And that's the context most people miss. And when we're saying America's a true old world, we really mean it, man. Like, this is a true old world.
This is the Norway stone, or we call it the Norway stone, and it says Norwegians essentially handed over, and that K might be some type of a code or a symbol for an individual or some company or group that back in those days when they were moving products around, they would take a stick, an ownership tag or a stone, and they'd put it in the barrel or put the stick inside the product. This is mine.
Come on now, look at this, look at this. He wants to call it rune. What is it, Norway stone? He don't want to even say what it is. That's Paleo-Hebrew, guys. And that, what he's calling hook theft, that's the Tav, man. That's what you call the Tav. That's the Hebrew, Paleo, we see that everywhere. You guys know. But what they call in Norway, so look at all these different artifacts that I hadn't even talked about this one yet. All right, we gotta do a video on this. Look at that. That's Paleo-Hebrew right there, man. Stop playing with it.
And what's interesting here is we have the hooked X, but we have something else that's very, very unique and pretty damn rare too. And it's something called an OR bin rune. Now, many of the skeptics have claimed, oh, they just copied this from the Kensington Runestone. Well, if they copied it from the Kensington Runestone, we have the word Norman. Remember that? Norwegians, N-O-R-R. O-R. Those two runes are separated. Here we have N-O-R, N-O-R, but the O and the R are together in a ligature rune or in a bin rune. You'll also notice that the angle of the bars is going down, and on the runestone they're horizontal. This is not consistent with that theory. And when we go to the island of Gotland at Lea Church, where I found the double dating, in fact this one is double dated as well, we see this same rare bin rune. Here's one example here, another example right there. This is a very unique and very rare trait. Again, you start to pile up these unique features, the possibility of a forgery really starts to get problematic. The third stone to me is perhaps the most interesting. It's the Spirit Pond map stone. And when you look at this area, it essentially corresponds with the geography of where these stones were found. And that one word there, right below the little bay there that you see is the word hop, which means harbor. Well, again, we have the hooked X. But that word means harbor. And Spirit Pond is about a mile away. You go up the old drainage area there, the river, and you go right into this protective bay. It works beautiful as a harbor. Vinland is on the stone. This is really neat. And then we have the year, 10th column, 11th row, 1402. And then we have a bunch of runes here that basically say, with word separators, that says takes 2 days. And then there's an arrow. You can't quite see it there, but I'll show it to you in a second. Lower right of that third photo, there's an arrow pointing to the right. Takes 2 days. Vinland takes 2 days. Remember that. And then on the bottom, I love this word. It basically means permanent positional situation. This is a map. One thing that's very interesting about this map is that the arrow is pointing to the right, which is south. Well, isn't south pointing down on a map? Well, it is today. It is today. But funny, in medieval times, most medieval maps, the south would be to the right, east would be at the top, and north would be to the left.
Just like the Hebrew, just like the ancient Hebrews' way of direction, telling. You guys heard that, right? The map's been flipped. We've been saying that east, west, north, south, they've been switched. So when you're looking at maps, you're looking at them sometimes backwards.
And that's what we have on this map. That's not consistent with a modern forger. Again, we have somebody who's very well educated. This is an example of one of these 12th century medieval maps. Interesting cross, isn't it? You see that we have Europe and Africa aligned east-west, but we know geographically that's not the case. And in this case, we have Jerusalem as the center of the world, which was a common theme back in those days. Well, let's take a look at the other side of this stone, which is
Jerusalem, the center of the world, just like Cusco means the center of the world, navel of the world, Cusco.
Is absolutely my favorite. We have another hooked X, and this word that we have spelled out in runes essentially means, I'm told, or Sherwin published in Algonquin, it means Middletaki, or good land. Well, interesting. And then we have a bunch of symbols. We have some plants on either side. Then we have a fish, a duck, a deer, an eel, which is a delicacy of the Norse, I'm told. We have what appears to be a native face, perhaps a native in a canoe. We have a bow and arrow, and we have a skin. And then we have a couple of very mysterious characters at the bottom that, to my knowledge, nobody's ever figured out. Well, I spent some time on this, and I was really intrigued by this symbol because I thought to myself, could this be related to the hooked X? It's not the same, but it's similar. Well, something really amazing happened. Do you remember when I showed you that 15th century manuscript yesterday that had the X symbol for A? An amateur researcher, the second guy you saw in the video, talked about Columbus, Michael Zalar. And he asked me to have lunch one day, and he said, Scott, I found something. And he found the X symbol for A. And then I said, where did you get this? He said, at the University of Minnesota Library, David King, published in 2001. And I said, we're going over there right now. I bought him lunch. I marched him over to the university library. He found the book. I have my, I'm a member of the library. I checked it out. And that night I stayed up till about 2 in the morning going through every single page.
Now, you guys hear how he has instant access to all these universities and stuff, right? They wouldn't give me that same access, trust me.
And on page, I think it was 248, I found something. And it was a picture of a plate from an astrolabe. And I'm telling you, I woke up. My wife, Janet, was sitting next to me, and she had fallen asleep, and her head was on my shoulders, and she wanted me to hurry up and go through the book. I said, no, one page at a time. So she'd fallen asleep, and when I saw this, Janet, she woke up. But if you'll notice, we have that symbol appears 3 times on this plate. And it's being used for the number 40. How clever is that? Combining the Arabic 4 with the Roman 10. And you know it's being used for 40 because if you look on this astrolabe right in the middle there, which is straight up vertical in the sky, 90 degrees from the horizon, you see the L, the Roman L for 50, and then you see our symbol, 90 degrees. Well, I got pretty excited, and then I went on the internet and I started looking at astrolabes. I bought a couple books, and I ended up looking at almost 600 astrolabes. This is the only one that has that symbol out of 600. Now, there might be one out there, but I can't find it. So I decided to go over to see this thing, which was at Oxford Museum of the History of Science. I made an appointment, and on the way I picked up some stranger who was hitchhiking on the road. He couldn't drive a car worth a darn. I'm sorry, Niven, it was me that was driving. But anyway, that's an inside joke. But I brought Niven with me because you'll find out in a second. And we examined that astrolabe. Every one of these plates has that symbol. And what's interesting is that we found a date. We looked in the literature and they had a write-up. And you know when this thing was dated to, this astrolabe, when it was made? 1350 to 1400.
So you guys understand what he's showing you and telling you, right? So they, in their museums within Europe and, you know, wherever he went, but this is supposed to be in the Europe side, right? And this same symbol they're finding, this is part of the history of science, guys, look. So literally, not only an inscription saying something is science in these tablets, it's a formula, right? These ancient languages are not more than just writing, it's formula too. All right, and their date matches the carbon or whatever the testing they did to the artifacts they found in the Americas, same symbol, right? So who brought that over there? Who brought this, you know? All right, and they only found one. They only got one of those examples out of 6. Look, he looked through 600 different ones. But they have so many in the Americas. And this is the ancient, this is the origin, right? Of look, the history of science. I'm telling you these symbols. And they're finding more of that here in the Americas, right?
Apparently it validates the date, the Easter table date that Dick came up with. I think it does. Well, this is pretty exciting, and I don't know anybody that knows about this, but something else happened. Well, let me tell you about the other thing that everybody was calling a ladder. It's not a ladder, it's a number. Again, this is another style of pentatic number. And if you look in that same book of David King's, this table right here lists a couple of examples of how they use pentatic numbers. It's very simple. It's finger counting. You go a bar all the way across, that's 10. If you go to the right, or excuse me, if you go to the left, it's 5. If you go to the right, it's 1. So look at that. What have you got? 4 bars going all the way across, 4 going to the right, 44. And when I figured that, when I put this together, I went, oh my God. And I ran and I got an atlas. And I said, where were these things found? You'll never guess. Here's Pompano Beach, Spirit Pond. That line of latitude is 44 degrees. And the next one down below is 42, so 43 is roughly in the middle. You know what? That's close enough for me. These things are found at that latitude. So what I think the mapstone is saying is, here's the map, and on the back side it says this is good land, this is what's here, and this is where it's at. There's no magic there, is there? That was pretty exciting, I have to tell you. There has been some archaeology done there, and I've actually talked to the guy standing in the middle, Ed Lennox, an archaeologist who worked on that dig. There were a couple of trenches that were dwellings that they found, and they dug one of them up. Now I'm not sure, I'm not clear if they did a dig on the second site, but I know they dug the one site. And I read the report and I saw something very interesting. And the way they described these dwellings is they were dwellings that were dug into the hill, and I don't have the terminology down right, but they basically dug a trench and then they put a peaked timber roof, and the roofs had collapsed, and they dated the wood to around 1600. Now, I subsequently learned that there was a settlement attempted at Pompano Beach in 1607. I don't know if I have that right. It was right around that time, but it failed. And of course, we all know about Jamestown and Plymouth Rock, but most people don't know about the settlement at Pompano Beach. It makes me wonder, did they know about that place? And that's the first place they tried to settle? That's a question I don't know the answer. But the one thing that really caught my eye was that they also tested a piece of wood, one of the floorboards from this dwelling, and it dated to 1405. plus or minus 95 years. Well, that date didn't mean anything to anybody after Einar Haugen's opinion, but guess what? Suddenly now it takes on renewed interest, I would think. And I would like to see somebody, any of the archaeologists here, if you can get anybody fired up, you should go back and take a look at this site. I think you'll find something if you look. Well, here are my conclusions. The composition of the retooling of the inscription makes any weathering studies that I might be able to do pretty difficult, at least at this point in time. The inscriptions are dated of 1401, 1402, not 1010. Changes the context of the message. And also, funny, all these features I talked about, everything falls right into place with that time period. It's consistent with it. The texts were clearly not copied from the Kensington Runestone. The barred runes represent the dotted runes, 7 of the 8 on the Ukna slab in Småland, Sweden. The numerous language features are certainly consistent with this time period, 1400s, contemporaneous with the Kensington Runestone for sure. And the orientation with east at the top is consistent with medieval maps. But this is the one here, this is the magic bullet as far as I'm concerned. The geographical accuracy of the mapstone and the astrolabe derived latitude of 44 degrees found on one astrolabe in the whole world that dates to this time period, in my opinion, makes a modern hoax impossible. And so my opinion is they're genuine. And I put some flowery language here, and I worded it this way because this is the way that Newton Winchell wrote his opinion about the KRS, so I'm paying tribute to him. Well,
Okay, I hope you guys can hear me better now. I don't know. Hopefully my mic is not messing up. As you guys heard him say, these are genuine. Like when you actually do research on it, like real scientific and real archaeological, not just throw it away, not just disregard it like all the other people. You actually determine this is legit. Yeah, and then you realize, uh-oh, why is it here? Yeah, and then you got to keep going. This is the true old world.
here we are at Spirit Pond. Is there any more? Well, yes, there is. There's another inscription down here in Narragansett Bay. And Narragansett Bay is about a 2-day sail from Pompano Beach, with favorable weather, of course. And what do we have? We have a boulder that is still sitting in the surf today that has a runic inscription on it. This picture was taken 2 weeks ago at extreme low tide. And what do you see? The hooked X. The hooked X is what ties these all together. Now, this is a relatively short inscription that has been translated by Dick Nielsen to be "such starvation for men." And there are some really amazing, unique features on this stone. Some people can't even get out of the starting gate with claiming that it was copied from either the Kensington Stone or Spirit Pond, because guess what? Of these 9 ruins here, only 3 of them are found on those stones. The rest of them are totally unique. One example I'll give you is, you see the R? Do you see how it comes all the way back and connects with the main stave? That's not found on either of the Spirit Pond or Kensington stones. So the devil's in the details. You got to look at the details, and it'll tell you what's going on. There's another example of the hooked X that showed up in Sweden in 2004 after we brought the runestone to Sweden, the Kensington stone. And this document, I could go on for a long time about this document, but what I'll tell you is that Edward Larson, whose name appears at the bottom, was a tailor. And in 1885, he was a young man who was a member of a tailor's guild. And he was probably a Freemason. And the reason we think he was a Freemason is because neither of these alphabets have been seen before. I just want to point out the X symbol for A, which had never been seen in Sweden before. Here's another example of it. And we have the hooked X in this runic alphabet here. And if you look carefully at those runes, especially towards the tail end of that Futhork, you'll see a lot of hooks on the runes. Now, there are other unique features here. These are all ruins that are found on the Kensington Runestone. And of course, what did the scholars do in Scandinavia? Boy, they jumped all over this and said, aha, somebody in Scandinavia could have taken this alphabet and come over to Minnesota and used it to carve the Kensington Runestone. Well, you know what? Close, but no cigar. You remember the magic bullet on the Kensington Runestone, the dotted R? It doesn't appear here. So I guess the point I would like to make here is that this appears to be a Masonic document. It says right here in Swedish, this is the secret style that goes way back. And we talked about this whole culture of secrecy that was going on with these mariners and sailors, and certainly within Freemasonry. But I want you to remember that term, Freemasonry. Do they have secrets? Maybe. The other known example of the hooked X is found in a guy that we're all very familiar with. And as far as I know, I'm the first person, and Dick, to point this out. He has the hooked X in his coded sigla that appears after he came back from the New World. Now you'll notice that, you see all those dots?
Sorry, Mr. Walter. I got a video on Mr. Sarko, so-called Columbus, and his brand logo signature. Yeah.
If you look at those two siglas, they're not the same, are they? Remember the dots we talked about in the runestone? Now, I don't know if there's a connection here or not, but again, more beer cans, I guess, huh? Interestingly enough, somebody talked about, I don't remember now, that I think it was you, Martin, that said Columbus had the Templar cross on his sails. Well, actually, it's the Knight of Christ sails, which is the order that was founded after the Templars were put down in 1307. Actually, they weren't founded, they just changed their name and went on as usual. And their main seed was at Tomar in Portugal. And you can see the Templar cross to the left, or one version of it, and the Knight of Christ crossed on the right. So we've got a connection here with the Knights of Christ, apparently, with Columbus. And I know that there's people out there who know Manuel Luciano da Silva, who is absolutely convinced that Columbus was a Portuguese. And I think he's probably right. And certainly was a member of the Knights of Christ. His father-in-law was a Grand Master with the Knights of Christ. He absolutely had a map.
Hopefully you guys can hear me. You guys see what I'm saying? We've been on this route for years. Columbus was, in fact, a Sephardic Portuguese Jew, so-called black man. Right? Listen to what he's saying. This is what they admit. This is what they know.
In my opinion, and I think he knew exactly where he was going. Let's talk about some of the facts.
He knew exactly where he was going. What I've been telling you guys. Columbus was never lost. He knew exactly where he was going. They're true India, India superior. He was never lost, guys. Remember.
The KRS and Spirit Pond are consistent with the medieval runic record. In other words, there's no reason to believe they're not absolutely genuine. The Narragansett Runestone clearly was not copied from the KRS or the Spirit Pond and is very likely medieval. The circumstantial evidence suggests Columbus was likely a member of the Knights of Christ. I'm not saying he was, but I'm saying the evidence suggests he was. The Larson papers contain a secret runic alphabet linked to an 1880s Swedish Masonic Tailors Guild. The X symbol for A was found being used as an alphabetical code. You saw that yesterday, circa 1450. And I want you to look at these dates. Aside, other than the Larson papers, they're all around a similar time period. These are facts. The Cistercians founded the Knights Templar in 1128. The Templars used codes extensively for financial transactions. The Templars had the finest sailing fleet in the world by 1300. Nobody argues with this point, at least not that I'm aware of. The Knights Templar were put down in 1307, and 80 to 90% of the Templar order, along with their ships, disappeared into history. And I've had a lot of historians I've talked to said, they were done after that. Well, logic tells me that if you've got 90 to 80% of your group that's out there somewhere, they don't just die off and disappear. I don't believe that. Okay, now we're going to do the same thing we did before. We're going to veer from the facts and we're going to start doing some speculation. And once again, it's going to be based on sound historical facts. I'm going to tell you what my interpretations are of the data that I presented and other data. All 5 runestones with the hooked X and Columbus's sigla are medieval. Those happen to be facts, I think, but the Narragansett is speculation on my part. The hooked X symbol appears to be an alphabetical code secretly used by the medieval Cistercians and Knights Templar. That's what I think it is. The 1885 Masonic Guild documents appear to link the hooked X to Freemasonry. And the hooked X likely represents important ideological symbolism. Why? The reason is because it's not found in the record, the runic record. So what is it? Logic told me if these stones are real, then there has to be an explanation for it, right? And if it's not in the record, then maybe there's something else. And this is where I had to switch over to the other side of my brain. And I have to tell you, I struggled with it. But I've had some people who helped me. And when I started talking about the hooked X in my lectures, people started to wait until I was finished and everybody left, and they approached me. They were Freemasons. And they said, I remember the first one, and I went up, he came up to me and I said, "Are you a Freemason?" He said, "Yes." I go, "How did I do?" He goes, "Pretty good." And I said, "Boy, oh boy, I'm really fumbling in the dark." And he said, "Well," he said, "maybe we can give you some help." And they did. Well, there was one other thing that I didn't get a chance to tell you yesterday on purpose about the Cistercians. And this is based largely on what I'm about to tell you now on Alan Butler's work. He was the guy who was standing at Rievaulx Abbey with the ruins behind him. This guy is one brave guy. And I was quietly thinking this with my wife by myself about this story I'm about to tell you. And then when I read one of Alan's books, I felt like I had found a brother. And I sent his website an email and I complimented him on his work. And I said, "Oh, by the way, I'm working with these rocks over here." The next day, I received 2 long emails, and he and I have been going back ever since. And basically what his thesis is, and what I was speculating on, but he's hit it out of the park, is that the Cistercian order, who became wildly successful, and the Templar order back getting into the beginning of the 14th century, who had a fascination for the Virgin Mary, were not fascinated with her because of what the church thought. They had a little different spin on it. I think, and Alan thinks, that they were using the Virgin as a metaphor for their true faith, which was what I call goddess ideology. And if you go back and you look at the records, there's some interesting things that happen. One of St. Bernard's disciples, Pope Innocent II, when he became Pope, I think it was in 1134, he gave a speech that essentially, this is what he argued. He basically said, hey, if Jesus is the Son of God, and of course this is the age-old battle in religion, what is their relative relationship? Aren't they, kind of equal? Well, maybe, maybe not. Well, if Jesus is way up here and the Virgin is his mother, aren't they equal? And this became known in church circles as the Great Heresy. And I haven't read as much as I'm going to about this, but this is a fact that I find very interesting and I think lends support. And I want you to take a close look at this image, because I'm about to tell you what I think the hooked X means. But I want you to notice that the Virgin, or the goddess in this case, I believe, is providing protection equally to both the monks and the nuns, right? Equally. Remember that image and look at her face. This is the most popular image of Saint Bernard of Clairvaux, by 2-to-1 in the manuscripts, in the carvings, is Bernard drinking the milk of the Virgin Mary with Jesus on his lap. And I find this very interesting. I don't know how it went over, but this is apparently a vision that became mythology associated with him, and he became a saint. But I just see something going on here. This is the Virgin or the Mother Goddess nurturing him. And of course, as you know, every abbey and all these cathedrals that they were involved in building are all named after her. And this is where we start to get into this symbolism, and I was trying to understand what it was all about. And I've been educated that when the structures that they built, the nave of the church where people come into worship, represents the womb of the sacred feminine, or the goddess. And when you come into church, you're being nurtured in the womb of the goddess. And then you go out into the world. And that ratio is consistent with what they call the sacred ratio, which is a 2-to-1 ratio. There's other ratios here, and I'm sure the mathematics people understand that. But in this case, we're talking about a 2-to-1 ratio. You can see the vesicus piscis there. Do you see those intersecting lines that forms a vertical almond shape? Oftentimes religious figures are seen within this shape, and that's that 2-to-1 ratio. And of course, you know that's created by intersecting two circles. Some people call that man and woman, heaven and earth, however you want to define it. But that ratio is apparently very important to the Cistercians. I find it interesting that the Kensington Runestone, whoever cut it down to roughly a 2-to-1 ratio. Was this because this ratio was sacred? I'll let you decide. I know what I think. And remember, being nurtured in the womb of the great goddess, and after the service is over and you go back out and are allegorically born back out into the world, how does that happen with a female? You go through the allegorical birth canal, right? That's what that almond-shaped vesicus piscis is. In Christianity, they call it Christ's ascension to heaven. That's what that symbol represents. To the goddess people, it represents being allegorically born through the birth canal of the goddess. So I guess it just depends on your viewpoint, how you interpret this symbolism. But I don't think there's any ambiguity about those doorways. Those are designed after the female genitalia. And this isn't about sex. This is beautiful. This is about birth, and this is all about allegories. And this is the one I just love. When you go into church, this is the womb of the great goddess. And that rose window represents the goddess, Mary Magdalene, the dove. And when the sun, which is considered a male deity, rises in the eastern sky, and the rays of the sun come in, you have the allegorical union of male and female. So in going through this and trying to get my mind properly orientated with this symbolism and these allegories, I went to the Masons, or actually they came to me, and they invited me to speak at their lodge, Grand Lodge in St. Paul, Minnesota on April 25th. And I took them through all this stuff. And then I got to the symbolism, and I said, hey, as I understand it, this is what this part of the symbol means. And again, the A symbol, the X is being used for A, and that's the symbol, the runic symbol that the scholars expected. Well, we certainly don't have that. But if you break the symbolism down, let's just start with the X. And if you cut it in half horizontally, this is basic symbolism. I'm sure most of you understand this. But you have the V symbol, which is the vessel, the chalice, the womb, the symbol for the female. When you flip it around, you have the sword, the phallic, the penis, the symbol for the male. But when you combine them to make an X, you have the allegorical union of male and female, heaven and earth, good and bad, all that stuff, I guess. And I got to this point with the Freemasons, and I looked at them and I said, okay, what's the hook? Help me. I need help. And there was about 150 of them there, and one guy raised his hand. And I said, yeah. And he said, a child? And I looked over at my wife and I went, duh. And she looked at me and she said, Sarah? And then, oh boy, did it get fun. But, you know, and everybody, first thing we thought about was the Da Vinci Code, right? Jesus, Mary Magdalene, and their child. And you know what? That's probably right. In my mind, hey, men and women get together and have children. I don't care what time you're talking about. That's what I think, but that's me. But I think it's more than that. I think what it is it represents, that little hook represents the continuation, the perpetuation, a generation, if you will, of an ideology, this goddess ideology, and I believe a tangible bloodline. But that's me. And I'm sorry that Bill Mann isn't here, because I want to give him I want to thank him too, because I've had some conversations with him around this time, and I shared this with him, and he thought it was pretty good. And then he said something to me. He said, you know what, Scott, don't forget about the Egyptians. And the second he said that, I'll never forget it. I was sitting at my office and I went, oh, something popped into my head. I hung up the phone with him. I said goodbye. I jumped in my car. I drove down to Midway Bookstore in St. Paul. I went to the Egyptian section, and in less than a minute, I found what I was looking for. It was a book on Tutankhamun. What do you see? The crossed crook and the flail, right? One represents the male god Osiris. The flail represents his wife Isis. And when they're crossed in this symbol, they represent kingship, royalty, and the crook carries the eggs, fertility. Is there a connection? Hell yes, come on. I think so. Are you kidding me? What's the goddess ideology? Well, I'm not 100% sure. I think I'm beginning to understand it. But I think that there is a connection, or as Alan Butler says, a golden thread that weaves through time. And this is an ancient religious belief system, and it goes way, way back to when humans first saw women give birth. They are the creators, right? Still are. At least that's what they thought. I used the, hey guys, try this one on your wife. Start calling her the goddess. Works pretty good, let me tell you. And it's true. And she pretends like she doesn't like it, but she does. But I think there is a golden thread, and it goes back before the Egyptians, and it weaves through the Egyptians, the Qumran and the Cistercians and the Templars. And this is some of the commonalities. They all wore white for purity. One of the things you'll see in the new book is I went back and I looked at these Egyptian kings. They all wear white, and they have red crosses. Check it out. Is there a connection? I think so. I don't have a picture. I should have thrown one in. They all practice ritual bathing. Remember those lavatoriums in the Cistercian abbeys? Very important to them. Same with the Qumran and the Egyptians, the cult of Isis worshippers. They had elaborate initiation ceremonies. I know there's some people in the room that understand that. They also tended to large flocks of sheep. The sheep are one of the primary reasons the Cistercians became so wealthy, and certainly the Essene did, and you go back to the Egyptians, you see the same thing. They were associated with military orders. This is another commonality. And they closely tracked the movement of Venus. There's some guy in the room, I think it's going to talk about Venus later on in a different context. I can't wait. But I asked myself a question. Could there be a connection to Freemasonry that would continue on after that Cistercian Templars? I think so. Let's talk about Venus for a second. The cycles of Venus. This planet has long been associated with love, sex, reproduction, and restored life. She was the manifestation in the heaven of the goddess. The planet Venus was very important, and the ancients tracked the movement of Venus along with the other heavenly bodies, as many of us know. And there's a very defined cycles that Venus has. One of them is the 8-year cycle. And what happens, and I want to give credit here to Ashley Cowie. He was the guy that said it must now be requestioned. And I had an opportunity to meet him when I went to see Niven and visit Roslyn earlier this year. And he talks about Venus, and I've looked into Venus, and this is his graphic. But basically, during its 8-year cycle, Venus spends 4 years of time as an evening star, rising in the western sky, getting to an altitude of about 22 degrees. Who was it that had an angle of 22.5 degrees? Somebody had that angle. I wanted to jump on that, but I wanted to wait until I got this. Something you might want to look into. And then it spends 4 years as a morning star in the east-southeastern sky. And it rises, and when it sets every day, it makes a horn. And when it's a western star, an evening star, it makes a horn that's opposite. These are called the horns of Venus. And you see this symbol all over the place in ancient iconography. Here's Isis with the horns of Venus, and you have the sun disk, the male god, in the middle. Could this be the allegorical union of male and female going back to then? I think so. But if you think about the Venus, the other thing that it does during its 8-year cycle, if you track its actual movement relative to Earth, it makes a 5-pointed star. This is an ancient symbol that's been seen going back to standing stone sites thousands of years ago. And they're seen, as far as I understand, all over the world. So people were tracking Venus, no question about it. But in Christianity, we know that the pentagram, the 5-pointed star, represents what? The devil, right? Well, why would it be in a northern window here at Amiens Cathedral in France? Do you see that? If it's a symbol of the devil, why is it there? I don't know. But it's interesting that that point, it's pointing down, right? What do you see in that little glowing window at the bottom? You see an equilateral triangle, which is the pubic triangle, the symbol of the goddess, where life comes from, right? Is there a connection? I don't know. Decide for yourself. And there's many other cycles, a 40-year cycle and other cycles. I don't want to spend too much time on this, but they use Venus as a calendar and a clock, and it's amazingly accurate. But there's another structure that I want to talk about. Remember, we went from Minnesota to Spirit Pond down to Narragansett Bay. And on the other side, the eastern side of the bay, there's this stone structure, two-story round structure. I'm sure most people in this room know what it is. It's called the Newport Tower, the Mystery Tower. And nobody knows when it was built. Some people think it's a colonial window or a windmill. I don't. There are a lot of things you can talk about, and there's many people who have done some really good research on the tower with the architecture. Jim Woodall, I want to mention his name. He's done a lot of great work. Sue Carlson, many others. But the architecture is clearly Templar, no doubt about it. And this goes back to the two-story tower on top of the Christ tomb in the Church of the Holy Sepulchre in Jerusalem, where the Templars were. When they came back, they started building round churches. I've seen them. Niven knows all about them. Many people do. But this is the architecture that is clearly Templar, and the Romanesque arches, the round tower, the octagonal footprint, the twin fireplace flues found in northern Scotland, castles. And there's also astronomical alignments. And the person who's really helped me understand these is Bill Penhallow in Rhode Island, retired professor of physics and astronomy. And he's documented many solar and lunar alignments. Oh, I'm getting there. But there's more. I asked myself, after going through all this research and trying to understand how these people's minds worked, and if there was something to this, could there be Venus alignments? Well, I tell you what, if this is a Templar structure, there had better be Venus alignments. That's what I thought. And I'm not an astronomer, but I know a little bit about math, and there is some interesting things inside this tower. There are a couple of windows up at the top. You see that little window at the top in the southeast window? And there's one to the west. And in Bill Penhallow's work, he did not have an account for these windows. And inside the tower, there are niches. And he accounted for all the niches in the windows except for two. And they happen to correspond with what I'm about to show you. When Venus reaches its maximum height in the sky as a morning star in the southeastern sky, the light will go through that window and it will hit a niche on the inside, western inside part of the tower. Bill did not account for that niche. Conversely, on the west side, if the light of Venus, when it reaches its maximum, which is about 22.5 degrees, 22, 23, it'll hit a niche on the inside. This is a diagram showing those two niches and how the light of Venus would go through. Bill's looked at this work, and he says there's some consistency there. It looks pretty good. There's something else that happens, and I want to give credit to Jim Egan, who last fall gave a talk at the Newport Tower Symposium, and he took photographs inside the tower and noticed that on the winter solstice, the sun hits this interesting keystone on the inside. And I'm just showing you the angle after a solar alignment happens going through the south window through the west window. This is Bill Penhallow's work. That light box keeps going as the sun rises. Now, as far as I know, I'm the first person to notice this. I don't know if there's anyone else. Let me know. I'll give them credit. But there are two very prominent, interesting keystones in the same archway in the tower. And they are clearly Masonic. And of course, the Templars might be connected to Freemasonry. I think so. This is called the Orphic Egg. And I want to thank some Freemason friends for helping steer me in the right direction. And you know what they told me? One guy in particular, Peter Tomlinson, he said, you know what, Scott? If you're worthy of knowing, you'll figure it out on your own. And I did. But I want to give him credit for steering me in the right direction. But I found it on my own. And this is what happens on that keystone, which is shaped like an egg, the Orphic egg in Freemasonry. Watch what happens to that light box. Holy cow, I just love that. I was pretty excited. What's going on here? Well, the sun is considered a male deity, right? And that round church is considered a womb by these goddess worshippers. And the Orphic egg is on the inside of the tower. It's in the womb of the great goddess. And what we have on the shortest, darkest day of the year, the allegorical union, once again, of male and female, I think. This is my interpretation. And I think what's happened is that egg is being fertilized. And now we have the progression to spring, right? And on the equinox, maybe we have the allegorical birth of what I think is the goddess ideology that the Templars and the Cistercians attempted to bring here around 1400. On the outside, there's another keystone in the same archway. They're back to back. And if you look at that shape of that keystone, that's another Masonic keystone. It's the Mark Master Mason shape. And back in medieval times, the Master Mason was given the honor of putting in the final keystone to tie in the structure. And it was, he carved a very special keystone that had the notches at the top. Now this is rough stone, but it's basically that same shape. I want you to notice that round red granite orb sitting directly on top of that keystone. Very symbolic. And you know what color the planet Venus is when it rises through the atmosphere? Red. So one day I was standing there looking at that keystone on the outside, and I'm telling you, I went like this. I said, "What's up with you? What are you pointing at?" Oh, and it hit me like a ton of bricks. You cannot make this up, because I went back and I did the calculations, and that angle, I'm not going to take you through it, is 17 degrees. If you start right in the center of that tower and you draw a line directly through both of those keystones, and by the way, they're not centered in the middle of the archway, and I guarantee you no self-respecting stonemason would do that. So what does that mean? It means it's off for a reason. It means something. Well,
All right, guys, hopefully my mic is working. What we're gonna do here is cut it short. Like he's literally almost done, and he's gonna start taking questions from the audience. But basically, I wanted you guys to see, you know, most of the presentations on both, what he's saying, what they tell each other, what they know, all the stuff they fear. You know, we got a hijack. But as you guys can see, based on all the research we've shown in the last 8 years, you know, America's a truer world, just more and more and more and more. I'm gonna upload these two presentations on my Patreon in case you'd like to have them. You know, I'll put them up, I'll load them there, you know, and you guys can have them. But I appreciate you guys sticking around all the way to the end. Been here almost 2 hours now. It's a good time to cut it off. And I hope you enjoyed. I hope you look into catching up on my channel if you're new, so you can see that we've proven why these things are here, because this is the true old world. All right. Oh, damn. I'm out. I sound bad, huh? I'm an alien. I'm an illegal alien. All right, man. Check you guys. We're going out with Joseph, Old World Arizona's song Apocalypse. Oh, wow.
All my dogs know the motto. Dodge the hijack. Unlock they kennels, let them loose. Dodge the hijack. Never bark, only howl. Dodge the hijack. Give me my board, surf the wave. Dodge the hijack. Leader BS in their midst. Dodge the hijack. Thrice great, I'm spitting true alchemy. Twice late, baby moms is after me. All hate, breastplate to cover me. Time to meditate. Got the tree. Long time coming, the almighty hand. Drakon flow all through my right hand. Lie on the Bible when I take the stand. Why so serious? Jesus ain't that man. Emphasis on the truth like a prophet. Bounty on your head, how I saw it, I'm a prophet. Your lies against my lines, that's the motive. I know it's motif like motif. When I eat on every beat. Cook it up, size. All my dogs know the motto. Dodge the hijack. Unlock they kennels, let them loose. Dodge the hijack. Never bark, only howl. Dodge the hijack. Give me my boy, surf the wave. Dodge the hijack. Leader BS in they midst. Dodge the hijack. Don't tell me simmer down. I'm on low heat. Turn my smile upside down. I'm a release. Busting rounds at his crown. R.I.P. He been a clown. He got down. Now he can't eat. Taking scalp, belt to ass. DMZ. These days is lost. They talking this and that. These gays is lost. They talking mix and match. These rhymes are made to tear up the track. Moses plates were made to set the record straight. Devil hate was made to put me on my back. Isaiah Cole in my mouth meant to burn his ass. Gator boots on my feet show his inside glass. Glistening con skin, copper brass. Jeremiah laying laws for the city. I'm walking straight, no ass poked out like Diddy. Laws make man question, but did he? Man, give him a clue with a green suit, diddle-a diddy. I'm a real supreme cacique, Mike Rocker. They Babylon, Hove, Mesh, show Mike Rockers. Be glad I only snorted, coulda coughed on your fire in my belly. One sneeze, hallelujah. Why they think I won't strike like I'm always waiting? He a virus, need the fire. COVID patience, so his mouth shut. He full of shit, King Harold. Kids don't trust him, women don't love him, beware him. Don't test the skills, check the kills. I air it, church of the holy horse and pickle poppers, be wary. This not a lesson or a lecture, this a rap attack. This a blessing to my lector when I eat the track. I step in the name of love when I do my dance. They won't step to my flame or they deadly glance. And there will always be a quinto jack. Fire 'em up, make 'em turn to crispy ash. No fairy tale ending, die